What's going on, everybody? Jeff Holiday here, and today I'm chilling out in the studio, aka the garage, with my Santa Gaines Christmas sweater. Now, a few days ago, I saw some people tweeting about this, and I intended to look into it, so I'm finally getting to it today, and I'm glad I am, because this is some troubling shit. On December 15th, the Washington Post published this article, and it's called "The CDC Gets List of Forbidden Words, Fetus, Transgender, Diversity." Now, I know what people are automatically going to knee-jerk and say, well, that's kind of an incendiary article title, and you're right, it absolutely is. But the content, nevertheless, there's a problem. The Trump administration is prohibiting officials at the nation's top public health agency from using list of 7 words or phrases, including fetus and transgender, in official documents being prepared for next year's budget. Policy analysts at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta were told that the list of forbidden terms at a meeting Thursday with senior CDC officials who oversee the budget, according to an analyst who took part in the 90-minute briefing. The forbidden terms are vulnerable, entitlement, diversity, transgender, fetus, evidence-based, and science-based. Now, if you're predisposed to hating on Trump or hating on the Trump administration, you're automatically going to assume that this means that these words are banned from everything that has to do with the CDC, and that's not necessarily true. This is banned from being on documents to do with their budget. So, on the surface level, with this incendiary title, it might seem like this is some crazy-ass thought crime, blah, blah, blah. But then you analyze it further and you realize it's a very, very specific place. But then you think about it a little bit longer and you have to wonder to yourself, why? Why would you do that? In some instances, the analysts were given alternative phrases. Instead of science-based or evidence-based, the suggested phrase is, CDC bases its recommendations on science in consideration with community standards and wishes, the person said. In other cases, no replacement words were immediately offered. And this I think is even actually worse. I think this is even worse because, okay, you can't use science-based or evidence-based. You have to use science in consideration with community standards and wishes. What community? What community are you talking about? You don't say the scientific community, you just say community. That's really, really shady. That's some shady-ass shit. Having something based on science or based on evidence. Now, you can make some arguments like, well, based on what evidence? Is this really well-vetted evidence based on scientific literacy, based on experts in the field, coming forth and giving testimony on this, that, and the other thing? Or is this evidence based on, say, shoddy work in shitty pay-for-published journals? So you can make that argument, but that feels a little bit going overboard to try and nitpick. But then saying you can't say science-based? Well, science-based means you're basing it on the consensus of science, the consensus of what we understand so far. Does that always mean it's correct? No, but it means that it's largely, usually correct, and it's at least correct right now for how we understand it. That's kind of the point. But instead, it's not even based on evidence, it's based on consideration with community standards and wishes. Which community? Are we talking about the body public? Do people get to vote on this now? I don't think that necessarily would be a good idea either, not when it comes to more advanced things like, diseases. Yeah, are we going to reclassify a measles outbreak just because enough people don't understand, like, infection rates or something? Like, what? Why? Or is it community-based in the realm of, like, a political sphere? A political community? If it would be a lot less worrisome if it was just in consideration with scientific community standards and wishes, or expert community standards and wishes. Even then you could have that issue as well. But let's move on. The Department of Health and Human Services, which oversees the CDC, will continue to use the best scientific evidence available to improve the health of all Americans, HHS spokesman Matt Lloyd told the Washington Post. HHS also strongly encourages the use of outcome and evidence data in program evaluations and budget decisions, which would be great, and that's probably what you should be doing. But why then ban these words from your budget documents? I I don't get it. The question of how to address such issues as sexual orientation, gender identity, and abortion rights, all of which receive significant visibility under the Obama administration, has surfaced repeatedly in federal agencies since President Trump took office. Several key departments, including HHS, as well as Justice, Education, and Housing and Urban Development, have changed some federal policies how they collect government information about lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Americans. Okay. All right. How does this even reflect? How does this reflect to the CDC? This is so weird. In March, for example, HHS dropped questions about sexual orientation and gender identity in 2 surveys of elderly people. About sexual orientation and gender identity in elderly people? Okay. They also removed information about LGBT Americans from its website. The Department's Administration for Children and Families, for example, archived a page that outlined federal services that are available for LGBT people and their families, including how they can adopt and receive help if they are the victims of sex trafficking. Oh, okay. Shit. So you have the Department of Health and Human Services, and for some reason they're dropping a page on how to get people help if they're the victims of sex trafficking. I don't get it. I don't really understand why that would have to be taken down. If you feel that's superfluous, maybe, but it's a fucking website. It's a website. How much data do you really think it's going to take up to leave that one little link, that blurb on a website on there? How many federal tax dollars does it take for each hyperlink? At the CDC, the meeting about the ban terms was led by Allison Kelly, a career civil servant who is a senior leader in the agency's Office of Financial Services, according to the CDC analyst, who spoke on the condition of anonymity because a person was not authorized to speak publicly. Kelly did not say why the words were being banned, according to the analyst, and told the group that she was merely relaying the information. Okay, so she's a senior leader in the agency's Office of Money, basically, the Office of Financial Services. So somebody higher than her had to tell her that this was something that was going to happen. Alright. Other CDC officials confirmed the existence of a list of forbidden words. It's likely that other parts of HHS are operating under the same guidelines regarding the use of these words, the analyst said. At the CDC, several offices have responsibility for work that uses some of these terms. The National Center for HIV/AIDS, Viral Hepatitis, STD, and TB Prevention is working on ways to prevent HIV among transgender people and reduce health disparities. The CDC's work on birth defects caused by the Zika virus includes research on the developing fetus. So to break this down, basically, they have specific programs that are in place that are trying to solve issues, things like AIDS and hepatitis, like the Zika virus, which is a huge fucking problem. But when you're talking about these things, and for instance, the Zika virus, some of the stuff that they're doing includes research on the developing fetus to make sure that the developing fetus can be protected against the Zika virus. If you can't say fetus in your fucking budget documents, does that mean that they're cutting money towards this? You don't know. We don't know. We don't understand exactly what the fucking purpose of banning these words is, but there are so many arguments for why it's a bad idea. Why ban words? Why? And of all places to ban them, why in your budget documents? What is that about? What? The ban is related to the budget and supporting materials that are to be given to the CDC's partners and to Congress, the analyst said. The president's budget for 2019 is expected to be released in early February. The budget blueprint is generally shaped to reflect an administration's priorities. And that's where things get a little sketchy. So to break this down a little bit, this is all about writing up what the budget is supposed to be for the CDC, and they have banned words that can go into the budget. We cannot mention this, we cannot mention that, we cannot mention this, we cannot mention that. These documents that they're writing, that they now have these banned words in, are supposed to go to the partners of the CDC, and then they're supposed to go to Congress, and all of this is basically to be part of the president's budget for 2019. Now, this is where you have to ask yourself certain questions. We don't actually know which way this goes. Is this coming from the side of the executive branch, in which the CDC is being directed into what things are appropriate to be put in for their budget? Or is this them preemptively trying to change things so that it will be more accepted by the executive branch? That doesn't actually seem like it would work either. A lot of this is so confusing, and there's not a lot of answers coming out about it. What is the impetus? What's the purpose of this? Why is this even being done? The longtime CDC analyst, whose job includes writing descriptions of the CDC's work for the administration's annual spending blueprint, could not recall a previous time when words were banned from budget documents because they were considered controversial. The reaction of people in the meeting was incredulous, the analyst said. It was very much, "Are you serious? Are you kidding?" In my experience, we've never had any pushback from an ideological standpoint. So even the people who work at the CDC were like, what the fuck is this? Why is this happening? What? Huh? News of the ban on certain words hasn't yet spread to the broader group of scientists at the CDC, but it's likely to provoke a backlash, the analyst said. Our subject matter experts will not lay down quietly. This hasn't trickled down to them yet. Well, I'm sure it has by now. The CDC has a budget of about $7 billion and more than 12,000 employees working across the nation and around the globe on everything from food and water safety to heart disease and cancer to infectious disease outbreaks prevention. Much of the CDC's work has strong bipartisan support. Kelly told the analyst that certain words in the CDC's budget drafts were being sent back to the agency for correction. 3 words that had been flagged in these drafts were vulnerable, entitlement, and diversity. God. Kelly told the group the ban on the other words had been conveyed verbally. Okay, so let's think about this a little bit further. You have senior people in the CDC, a government agency, that are instructing their low-level analysts that when they're writing up the budget plan, they cannot use certain words. These, I guess they're now like the seven verboten words that you cannot say, which is just bizarre to me to begin with. And this is all going into them writing up their budget, which is going to be sent to their partners, to Congress, and to be included in the president's budget for 2019. Really fucking weird. And that these terms are vulnerable, entitlement, diversity, transgender, fetus, evidence-based, and science-based. Now, you can think that there's a politically loaded part to this with vulnerable, entitlement, diversity, transgender, and fetus. That's obvious. But then evidence-based and science-based is really fucking weird. Now, not only is it just troubling for that, but just the idea that a government agency is banning words that itself can use for the purposes of them getting the money they need to do the programs that they're designed to do. Now, why this is even worse, is this is not the first time that words have been banned in regards to the government this year. Check this out. In the New York Times, October 20th, 2017, EPA scrubs a climate website of climate change. The Environmental Protection Agency has removed dozens of online resources dedicated to helping local governments address climate change, part of an apparent effort by the agency to play down the threat of global warming. The site, previously the EPA's Climate and Energy Resources for State, Local, and Tribal Governments, has been renamed Energy Resources for State, Local, and Tribal Government. About 15 mentions of the words climate change have been removed from the main page alone, the study found. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole article, just mostly for time, but I do plan to eventually do a video on climate change, because it is a pretty important one, and it's very divisive. But the main point of this is still the same. The CDC and now the EPA, you have what seems to be this concerted effort of scrubbing politically charged terms out of the public sphere, out of the public's perception, which is really hideous. It's horrifying to think about. The government, at some level, whether it is all the way to the top and it's a big conspiracy, or down to these specific agencies, are choosing to shape their information along specific political agenda lines. These are agencies that are designed to basically improve the quality of human life. The CDC is supposed to be helping with infectious diseases and making sure we don't die of a fucking plague. The EPA was created because our smog was so bad back in the 60s that 400 fucking people died in New York from the air quality, for fuck's sake. Like, these are agencies that have a fucking point, and they're based and rooted in empirical science, and it relies on that for them to function the way they need to be the most effective. And words are being banned? I think the main thing that I'm taking away from this is I just want to know why. Even if it's a bullshit answer, I'd like to at least have them say it's a bullshit answer, so then I can further investigate whether it's a bullshit answer or not, and then ask again, why? Like, I want to get to the bottom of this. This is so fucking weird. Anyway, that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for your attention. Appreciate you. Be sure and check out the link in the description for the YouTube Saints, my show that I do with Wizard of Cause. It's a great time. We have a ball over there. But otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.